On the morning of her 35th birthday, Emily Carter woke before the alarm, staring at the ceiling as a quiet tension pressed against her chest, the kind that came without warning and refused to leave. And when Daniel rolled over and kissed, her forehead smiling with unusual warmth, she sensed something was different, especially when he told her not to plan anything for the evening. His voice calm, but his eyes hiding a secret. After he left for work, Emily moved through the day on autopilot, answering emails, smiling at coworkers, accepting polite birthday wishes. All while her mind drifted back to the slow changes in her marriage, how love had not disappeared but had softened into routine, how conversations had turned brief and practical, how laughter now felt scheduled instead of natural. And yet she reminded herself that this was normal, that long marriages grew quiet, but the feelings stayed with her, heavier as the day passed. When evening came, Daniel took her to a small restaurant by the river. Candlelight reflecting off the water outside, the setting far more romantic than anything they had done in years. And Emily felt both touched and uneasy, noticing Daniel's hands tremble slightly as he slid a gift box toward her, stopping her just before she could open it by saying there was something else, someone else, and before she could ask a question. The restaurant door opened and time seemed to slow as a man stepped inside. Tall, familiar, older, but unmistakable. And the breath left her body when she recognized him as Michael Reynolds, a name she had buried deep in memory. A man who belonged to a chapter of her life she thought was closed forever. Her heart raced not with joy, but with shock. Confusion flooding her face as Daniel stood and greeted Michael warmly. Introducing him like this moment had been carefully planned. While Emily struggled to keep her expression steady, her mind rushing through years of memories she had never fully processed, moments of laughter, unfinished conversations, and a goodbye that never felt complete. Michael smiled gently, not boldly, his presence calm yet powerful. And Emily realized how dangerous familiarity could be, how quickly the past could pull at emotions she believed she had outgrown. She sat through dinner, barely tasting the food, answering questions with short replies, watching Daniel closely, searching his face for explanation, wondering why her husband would invite someone who clearly carried emotional weight into her life, especially on her birthday, and as the candles burned low, Emily felt the night turning into something far bigger than a celebration. Sensing that this surprise was not meant to entertain her but to confront her, and as she looked from Daniel to Michael, the comfortable life she knew suddenly felt fragile, like it was standing on a quiet edge, waiting for one honest moment to either fall apart or transform forever. After that night, Emily could not escape the weight of what had happened, and the next morning felt strange and unreal, like she had stepped into someone else's life. Because Michael was no longer a memory but a living presence nearby, and even though Daniel acted normal, making coffee and asking about her day, there was a quiet tension in his voice that made every word feel important. Later that afternoon, Emily met Michael at a small cafe. Not because she planned to, but because avoiding him felt harder than facing him. And when he walked in, she noticed how time had changed him just enough to make him unfamiliar yet safe. And they talked carefully at first about work, cities, weather, and life. But beneath every sentence was a deeper truth waiting to surface. And when Michael finally spoke about the past, his words were gentle and respectful, saying he never blamed her for how things ended and that he had often wondered if she was happy, which made Emily's chest tighten because she did not know how to answer honestly. As they talked, memories returned fast, reminding her of a younger version of herself who dreamed loudly and loved deeply. And she realized that what unsettled her was not attraction, but recognition. The feeling of being truly seen, something she had slowly stopped feeling in her marriage. That evening, Daniel finally explained himself, telling Emily that he had noticed her quiet sadness over the years, the way she smiled less and spoke less about her feelings, and that bringing Michael was not meant to hurt her, but to give her clarity, to remind her of who she was before life became routine. And his honesty broke something open inside her, because it was painful but sincere. And she saw fear in his eyes, not control. As days passed, Michael remained present but distant, never crossing boundaries. Never asking for more than conversation, which made everything harder, because respect carried its own emotional weight. And Emily found herself torn between gratitude and confusion, questioning whether love meant holding on or letting go, whether choosing stability meant losing herself, and whether revisiting the past was helping her heal or pushing her toward something she did not yet understand. One quiet night, standing alone by the window while Daniel slept, Emily realized this birthday was no longer about gifts or celebration, but about facing truths she had avoided for years. And as she watched the city lights flicker outside, she knew that whatever choice came next would change her life, because the past had returned not to take something from her, but to ask her an impossible question she could no longer ignore. The days that followed felt heavier, as if the air inside Emily's life had thickened. And every small moment carried meaning she could not ignore, because Michael's presence, even when silent, stirred thoughts she had kept buried, and Daniel's calm behavior made everything more intense, since he did not accuse or question her, but instead grew quieter, watching her with a patience that felt almost painful. Emily noticed how her routines began to shift, how she paused longer before speaking, how memories returned without warning. Not romantic fantasies, but moments of honesty from a time when she spoke freely and felt deeply understood. And she struggled with guilt because these feelings were not about wanting someone else, but about realizing how much of herself she had slowly set aside to keep life smooth and safe. Michael sensed the emotional tension and chose distance, canceling casual plans, speaking only when necessary, making it clear he did not want to be the reason for damage. And that restraint made Emily respect him even more, because he was not chasing anything, only responding to what already existed. One evening, Daniel finally spoke openly, his voice steady but tired, admitting that he had felt her slipping away for years, not physically, but emotionally, and that bringing Michael into their lives was his desperate way of forcing honesty into a marriage that had become too careful, too quiet. And his words stunned Emily because she realized he had not acted out of confidence, but fear. Fear of losing her without ever understanding why. She asked him why he didn't just say something sooner, and Daniel answered simply that he thought love meant enduring, not questioning, and that he believed stability was enough. But now he knew it wasn't, and that broke Emily's heart in a new way, because she saw how both of them had been silently sacrificing truth to avoid pain. Later that night, Michael asked to meet her one last time, not in private, but in a public park, where the city noise kept emotions grounded. Annie told her he planned to leave early, saying that being near her had reminded him of something important, that some connections are powerful, not because they last, but because they shape who you become. And he said he did not want to be a test she had to pass or fail, only a reminder of choice. Emily listened, holding back tears, understanding that this moment was not about romance, but release. And when Michael thanked her for the memories and wished her peace, she felt something settle inside her, as if a question had finally formed, clearly, instead of haunting her. That night, lying awake beside Daniel, Emily realized the true conflict was not between two men, but between staying quiet and speaking honestly, between comfort and growth. And she understood that avoiding pain had slowly created a deeper sadness neither of them knew how to name. As morning approached, Emily felt calm for the first time since her birthday, because clarity had replaced confusion, and she knew that the decision she needed to make was not about leaving or staying, but about choosing a life where her voice mattered, where love was active instead of assumed. And as sunlight entered the room, she prepared herself to speak a truth that could either rebuild everything or finally set them both free. That morning, Emily sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table as sunlight filled the room. And for the first time in years, she did not soften her words or hide her feelings. Because silence no longer felt like love, and she told him everything she had been, holding inside how she felt unseen, how she had slowly lost her voice, how comfort had replaced connection, and how Michael's return had not created new feelings, but had awakened old parts of herself that she missed. And Daniel listened without interrupting, his face serious, his hands still, absorbing each word even when it hurt. And when she finished, he admitted his own failures, saying he had confused stability with happiness and routine with safety, believing that providing and being present was enough, never realizing that emotional distance could grow quietly between two people who still cared deeply. Instead of arguing, they chose honesty, agreeing that love could not survive on silence. And Daniel suggested counseling not as a last chance, but as a new beginning, a place where they could learn to speak without fear. And Emily agreed, not because she was unsure of him, but because she was finally sure of herself. Later that day, Michael left town, leaving behind a short note thanking Emily for the honesty of the moment and reminding her that some people enter life not to stay, but to guide you back to yourself. And Emily read it without guilt, understanding that closure did not mean forgetting, only accepting. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were real, filled with uncomfortable talks, small efforts, and emotional rebuilding. And slowly, laughter returned in unexpected moments. Not loud or forced, but genuine. And Emily noticed Daniel, trying in ways he never had before, asking questions, listening fully, sharing his own fears instead of hiding behind calm, and she responded with openness instead of withdrawal. The marriage did not become perfect, but it became honest, and that honesty changed everything, because love no longer felt like a duty, but a choice made daily. On a quiet evening, weeks later, Emily realized that her birthday gift had never been a person, but a moment of truth, a mirror that showed her what she needed. And she understood that Daniel's greatest act of love was not bringing someone from her past, but being brave enough to face what came after. As she rested her head on his shoulder, watching the city lights fade into night, Emily felt a deep peace, knowing that the future they were building was not based on fear or habit, but on understanding, growth, and the courage to begin again together.